Hi everyone, Shawn from Université Sainte-Anne, and I'd like to present our poster, Conservation of Breeding Roseate Terns in Kespukwitk. This is a collaborative project that involves biologists and students from Université Sainte-Anne and Acadia University, a number of island stewards that live in the Pubnico area, including Alix and Ted Deon, biologists from the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, including Pam Mills, and Environment and Climate Change Canada, a CWS unit, in particular Julie McKnight from Dartmouth. So the base of this study has really been born out of a number of threats to breeding roseate terns, which is an endangered species in Canada and the United States. And currently about 75% of the Canadian breeding population of the endangered roseate tern nests on islands in Lobster Bay. Usually about 40 to 50 pairs are found each year, usually on one island, but that doesn't meet the recovery goal of 80 pairs. And there are a number of threats to breeding roseate terns in Canada. That includes predation by gulls on tern eggs and their young, invasive plant encroachment and erosion of nesting habitats, and in terms of plants, in particular wild radish. And some recent research with GPS work has shown that foraging habitat for roseate terns during the breeding season is probably quite limited in the Lobster Bay area, as is the case across the range of the species. So our project focuses on a number of recovery strategies that target these different threats that I just listed. The project itself is actually led principally by students, undergrad and master's students from Université Sainte-Anne and Acadia University, community island stewards such as Alix and Ted Deon, and also local fishers, lobster fishers, who help monitor the presence of terns in and around some of the outer islands of Lobster Bay early during the breeding season, because this coincides with the lobster breeding season. Now, it's important to note that roseate terns in Lobster Bay, like elsewhere across the range in northeastern United States and Canada, always nest with Arctic terns and common terns. In terms of tern habitat enhancement, there are sort of four target initiatives that we try to lead each year. Try to ensure that habitat is free of nesting gulls, remove marine debris, and in particular fishing gear such as lobster traps and rope. Try to limit invasive plant encroachment through weed barrier placement before the terns arrive in key nesting areas on the islands, and also trying to remove dense stands of vegetation throughout the breeding season. And then finally we try to provision nesting shelters for roseate terns, knowing that not all roseate terns breeding on these islands will use the boxes, but the majority of them will. And it provides an extra special concealed area for the young roseate terns once they leave the nest, and sort of hang out for the first few days before moving down the slopes toward the intertidal area. The project really focuses as well on capacity building. So each year, usually 2 or 3 new students are brought on board, as well as a number of community members, and they're trained in the different types of roseate tern stewardship practices, such as tern habitat management, but also looking at threats to terns at some of the foraging areas that can be observed from the shoreline. Research and monitoring has always been a sort of a key pillar of this project. A few years ago, Nick Knudsen, who recently graduated with a master's degree from Acadia University, looked at patterns of nest site selection among breeding roseate, common, and Arctic terns on Gull Islands, and looked at habitat partitioning and nest success. And more recently, Alexis Saunier, who as well as at Acadia University doing her master's, is looking into the comparative foraging ecology of roseate, common, and Arctic terns, in particular in North Brother Island. So she's asking questions such as, what are these birds eating? What are the differences among the 3 species? And where are they going to get their food? And one of her hypotheses that she's looking into is whether or not roseate terns act as specialists in comparison to the other 2 tern species. So if you have any questions about Alexis's project. She'd be happy to give you, I guess, a more detailed rundown of her work. So to wrap things up, I'd like to acknowledge the few funders that have really made this work possible. It costs money to hire students each year, to buy the necessary equipment, to get out on the water, to pay for gas and whatnot. So we're very thankful of the work, I guess the support of Environment and Climate Change Canada, Nature Canada, and the Nova Scotia Species at Risk Conservation Fund. Thank you very much.